We can use a combination of checkbox group and button widgets in our apps to change the measures and dimensions displayed in table columns and rows. In this example, we have an app that already contains a table. Next to it, we'll build a control panel. We'll start by adding a checkbox group widget to the canvas. We'll move the widget into place, remove the default values, and rename the widget so we can identify it when we're creating scripts. Here, all 5 checkbox groups that make up our control panel have been added, positioned, and renamed. 4 of the checkbox groups will be visible to users, but the 5th will be used only to hold values selected in other widgets, so we need to set it to be invisible at runtime. Next, we'll add, position, and rename labels for each checkbox group widget, starting with the first checkbox group, which we'll use to select the measures to display. Here, the remaining labels have been added. Next, we can add, position, and label a series of buttons that will apply the changes selected in the checkbox group widgets, starting with a button to set the table to display the selected measures. We can rename and label the button in the Designer panel. The remaining buttons have been added, positioned, renamed, and labeled as appropriate. Next, we'll create a series of script variables in which we'll store the measures and dimensions chosen from the checkbox group widgets. We'll use these later in our scripts. We'll start with a variable for all dimensions in our dataset. We'll leave the type as the default of string and set the variable as an array to hold multiple values. Here, additional script values have been created to hold all measures in the dataset, the dimensions selected for the table columns, the dimensions selected for the table rows, and selected measures. Each has a type of string and is set as an array. Now we'll create a couple of script objects to define what will happen when a dimension or a measure is chosen. We'll name the folder as utils and add a second function. The first function will set the dimension filter based on the free checkbox group. While the second will set the measures based on the measures checkbox group. We'll also add an argument for selected IDs, which is also an array. Next, we'll define the scripts for these objects, starting with the setDimensionFilter function. A new tab opens where we can build a script to define what happens when the function is called. Note that we can get assistance by pressing Ctrl plus space, which brings up a list of objects and methods we can use to build our statements. In this example, we'll start by removing all items for the checkbox group widgets. We'll select the columns checkbox group, add a period, open the Content Assistance again to select the Remove All Items method, and end the statement with a semicolon. We'll repeat the statements for the rows and free checkbox groups. Next, we'll create 2 new string arrays and save one in our current dimension column script variable and the other in the current dimension rows script variable. We'll get the dimensions that are now in the table's columns and push each into the string array of current dimension column. And do the same for the rows, pushing the row dimensions into the string array of current dimension rows. We'll get all dimensions, check which ones were chosen from the dimensions checkbox group, and update the dimensions in the free checkbox group. In the script for the Set Measure Filter function, we'll remove any already set dimension filter of the table, add the values in the selected ID's argument as the new dimensions in the table, and save the selected measures in our current measure filter selection script variable. Next, we'll define what happens when we click the buttons on the canvas. For the Set Selected button, we'll get the selected measures of the Measures checkbox group and then use the Set Measure Filter function to set them as the measure filters for our table. For the Remove All button, we'll set the selected keys and the measure filter to empty arrays. For the Set All button, we'll set the selected keys of the checkbox group to the All Measure script variable and use the Set Measure Filter function to set the measure filter to all measures. For the Remove button for the Columns checkbox group, we'll get the selected dimensions from the Columns checkbox group and remove them from the table, and then call the Set Dimension Checkboxes function to show the new selections. We'll do something similar for the Remove button for the Rows checkbox group. For the Add to Column button, we'll get the selected keys of the free checkbox group and add the dimensions to the table as columns. The script will then call the Set Dimension Checkboxes function to set the checkboxes to the new selection. We'll do the same for the Add to Row button. Now we'll close the open tabs. Finally, we'll define what happens when the application is first run through the onInitialization function of the canvas itself. First, we get all the measures from the data source of the table. We'll define an array called Selected Keys with a type of string, and then add all measures to both the Measures checkbox group and the Selected Keys array. We'll also set the selected keys of the checkbox group and the All Measures script variables to the Selected Keys array. Next, we'll define another string array. We'll add all dimensions from the data source to both the new array and the All Dimensions checkbox group. We'll also set the All Dimensions script variable to the same array. Finally, we'll call the Set Measure Filter function to set the selected keys to the Selected Keys array, and the Set Dimension Checkboxes function to set the Dimension checkbox group to its initial state. Now we'll save our changes and run the application. By default, all measures display in the table. We can remove them all, or select specific measures and apply the selection. If we add the time dimension to the Columns checkbox, we can see in more detail what happens in each year for each measure. If we also add the Location dimension to the Rows checkbox, we can see additional information by state. Note that we can remove dimensions from either the Columns or the Rows checkbox groups. Thanks for watching.